Hi, my name is Tyler Capanna, and this is my final capstone for applied psychology and human development. Start off by introducing you to three prominent figures in psychology, of which we will talk about Jean Piaget, Yuri Brofenbrenner, and Sigmund Freud. This will be the framework of my project and the three that I mentioned for various stages of infancy, middle childhood, and adolescence. Starting us off with infancy and cognitive development, I chose Jean Piaget's sensory motor stage that shows us how infants learn about the world around them through interaction and discovering concepts like object permanence, which reveals that things continue to exist even when they cannot be seen. My personal experience I chose for this was the rubber bands around my mother's arms. She is a postal carrier and she has been carrying a mail bag on her shoulder longer than she carried me on her shoulder. But this interaction for me in infancy helped illustrate the cognitive development at the time, to which I understood that the rubber bands around my mother's arms existed outside my mother's care. I would engage with the rubber bands by plucking and snapping them. She would take them off or snap them back at me. I really remember these rubber bands and observing my mother's interactions with them. Wouldn't wear them for any other occasion, so there obviously had to be another use there. This understanding really goes beyond the mere object permanence, though, and we start to touch on symbolic use of objects, which is more of the advanced cognitive development. We could understand and apply that the recognition of these rubber bands around my mother's wrist were associated with her work, indicated the beginnings of my understanding that my mother has roles and functions outside of just taking care of me, into both cognitive development and early social understanding. I would say that this ties in beautifully with Piaget's theory, as it shows that cognitive development is not just about learning, but also to recognize the continuity of objects and social and environmental roles. How cognitive development is not only about recognition and the continuity of objects, but rather the beginnings of understanding the wider world and the various roles within them. For middle childhood and physical development, I chose Yuri Brofenbrenner and how children's development is influenced by different layers of their environment, of which range from immediate surroundings to more broader societal influences, which the picture in the middle sort of shows. And through this, the interplay is surfaced between individuals and surrounding social contexts. We learn about the microsystem and immediate influences, which would include work, school, friends, family, anything in the immediate circle that play a significant role in this development in middle childhood. In middle school and during these years of middle childhood, I observed various gender roles exhibited by classmates and the expectations from these direct environments that shaped my overall understanding of navigating these social landscapes and discerning how to fit in, really, as well as the perception of broader social norms, which would bring us to the exosystem, which includes the influences that are not directly in contact with me, but rather the overall developmental environment, say my parents' friends as well, and the other extended circles. I learned of ways to behave that safeguarded my societal acceptance overall, even if it meant masking my true feelings of sexuality, which I knew was apparent then. We also learn of things like the meso layer and interaction between contexts and how that form a coherent but rather challenging narrative in my mind about gender and sexuality that I had to navigate without explicit guidance or embraced individuality. Learn about the macro system and overarching cultural values within that, like social norms and economical systems that comprise more than just that, things like law and values and customs that also play a role that we might not think about. These values about masculinity and stigmatization of differing sexual orientations during my middle childhood contributed to these pressures that I felt to conform and influenced how I perceived myself and others. It's clear that Bronfenbrenner's theory can be applied to understand subtle yet profound ways in which our environment system shaped my own identity and social cues, particularly for me in navigating gender roles and emerging sexuality. Middle school was ruthless. This brings us to the adolescence stage and more recent socio-emotional development in my life. Talk about Sigmund Freud's theory, which focuses more on emotional and psychological challenges of adolescence, particularly how one may navigate complex relationships and mature emotionally through resolving earlier developmental stages and challenges. Freud's theory of psychosexual development, particularly in the genital stage, is pertinent to adolescence for a multitude of reasons. But this really focuses on the maturation of sexual and emotional identities, or so for the challenges and developments of later adolescence. My personal experience for adolescence was a solo trip to the island of Puerto Rico, where I engaged in new emotional and sexual experiences during the real beginnings of my life. Turning 18 was really a marking period for me. I was filled with a sense of independence and that I was ready to take on the world and perform and operate as an adult, now technically being one, with graduation and many special times in one's own life, but especially adolescence, where this feels more concentrated. And with this period coming to a close, did this spark such a sense of my overall genital libido and the establishment of sexual relationships, along with the typical other developments that challenged the explorations in this period of development. This really was a time for socio-emotional growth and identity formation for me. I really found a support system in my senior year of high school, but also was able to make decisions on my own, travel to new places and meet new people with new experiences along with that. Furthering this, we know that Freud believed that the genital stage really involves not only just biological maturation, but also significant psychological growth, of which my self-discovery and emotional development during this trip showcased how my adolescence was a defining period for me in forming deeper understandings for my own desires, roles, and relationships within this broader social context. I recall not only dealing with typical adolescent challenges, but also testing and confirming my own emotional and social theories. I prepared myself by changing my lifestyle on vegetarianism to eating meat. I smoked for the first time. I drank and trusted myself with these responsibilities that were totally new to me and unknown. I was able to establish who and how I relate to others, which supports Freud's socio-emotional and psychosexual development theories. This was a wonderful time for me, but also was formed by my own direction at times, considering I left the island of Puerto Rico having experienced my first heartbreak as well in adolescence. So I think this period is particularly identifying for me in my stages of development, but especially socio-emotionally and psychosexually, because I held off on a lot of exploration with myself, kind of just was a goody two-shoes up to the age of 18. So I take these periods with a grain of salt, but this project has certainly brought to light, more apparently, my evolvement in my development through various stages with the application of psychology. I really look forward to the future stages of development and that of adulthood, real adulthood. As much as I don't want to face it, I understand that I am certainly past the adolescent stage of development and have formed socio-emotional relationships and balance within myself, whilst also experiencing for the first time mental health concerns and addiction issues, all things that really take it to the next level of development in adulthood. I'm very grateful for this journey through not only this capstone project, but the discovery and application of my own individual psychological past. This capstone for me marks more than just an academic milestone, but rather a very pivotal chapter in my life story. I am still very much so in a period of personal growth, which will allow me the time and space to work on a attainable path forward. In the past 4 years since adolescence, I have had a lot of ups and downs, and I am just incredibly grateful to be at this point now through the benefit of continued guidance and resources that are just limitless in their application towards the greater scope of my life and path ahead. I would not change necessarily the sequence of my development and the sequential stages that led me to this point, especially since adolescence, but in learning specifics of developmental psychology on my formative years and how this has impacted me today and will impact me in my future, but also much more apparent and clear with how psychology is really who we are and is a complement to our evolutionary ways. I hope these stages really stand out as quite personal and provide clear understanding towards human psychology and developmental stages. This concludes my final capstone on applied psychology and human development. Thank you so much for listening, and this certainly will apply to greater aspects of my life in the future. I'm eternally grateful for the psychology classes I participated in this semester, and I know that these are all stages of life and are a part of the journey. And in learning this psychological backing, I was able to really kind of find purpose within that and clarity for my own means of healing. And that might be apparent more so in this array of pictures. I definitely had some ups and downs and in-betweens throughout all these stages, but especially since adolescence, having graduated nearly 5 years ago now. With this, I feel these classes have helped me get out of my sort of pit that I was in and really continue the pursuits that I have in savoring life and enhancing my psychological and socio-emotional aspect to really be able to help others and work towards long-term healing and continued successes. So thank you so much for listening, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions. Thanks for watching.